Hello everyone, welcome to Gardening by the Bay. I'm your host today, Mary Casement, and we're at the amazing farm, Gore Farm, just outside of St. Stephen. It's owned and operated by Peter and Nora Heelis. It's going to be a great show. Hello everyone, welcome again to Gore Farm with our host, who is not really Donald, it's Peter Heelis, and we're in one of the greenhouses. This apparently is one of the small greenhouses that they use for their personal family provisions, which is enormous, gigantic to me. And hopefully you're going to give us the ins and outs of everything here. You've got incredible tomato plants.
Yeah, ours would be bigger than normal because we're going to plant those out. Well, technically it's scheduled for next week, but it's going to be so cold again next week. Did you see the weather? It's going to be terrible again next week. So, down to almost freezing every night. So we might wait one more week. So normally our tomatoes would be out the second week of May. But they don't go outside. Technically, they go into what we call a cold frame.
Okay.
But it's a bigger cold frame.
Sheltered at night?
Sheltered at night, but not heated.
Not heated, okay.
So we have to be just a little careful. They would still freeze in there if you got, a real cold snap.
Yeah.
So that's why these are so big, is that they would normally go out. And of course, when we plant tomatoes, we take those three leaves off.
Okay.
And we bury it to that level, right?
Right.
Because
do you lay them on the side, or do you
lay them on the
do
side.
them deep? Okay.
Yeah. And then they will root all the way up. All those little hairs will produce roots.
Right.
So it gives you a much better plant.
Stronger plant.
Stronger plant. And then so we'll set them back a week when we set them in, because they won't continue to grow for a while, and then they catch up when all those roots set up. And,
okay.
And then so then we'll set them up. We grow about 54 tomato plants a year for our families.
Just your personal family?
Just our personal families, but now we have 3 children, and then that gets bigger and bigger, mushrooms out, but we would grow 54, and we grow about 9 or 10 varieties, sometimes 12 varieties of tomatoes, because
really?
Some we can, and those are plum tomatoes,
okay. For cooking and later in this year.
And then some we just grow simply to eat, so there might only be 2 or 3 plants of those. And then everybody likes the calabrese salad, so you have to have the red one, you have to have an orange one, you have to have a yellow one.
Okay.
So that we grow 1 of each of those or 2 of each of those. So, and then the grandkids just love cherry tomatoes.
Who doesn't? Yeah.
That's right, right? So we have, usually I try to grow 4 or 5 varieties of those so they can go down and just eat out of the greenhouse, and all through the season.
And do you ever have tomato plants like in the kitchen or on your deck, or do you keep them all?
No, Nora will put a couple in the kitchen garden. That when you came up the driveway I showed you just across behind us here there's a little raised bed, and we call that the kitchen garden.
Okay, and we'll have a look at that later, folks.
Later. Yeah. And she would grow things in that. I should say before we start is that this is not my operation, right? Oh. So it's a family farm.
Oh. Okay.
So very much a family farm. I'm in this greenhouse this morning with you, but this is Nora's domain.
Okay.
Nora has done all the work in here. I have done very little in this greenhouse. Okay. Very little. I might lug a bag of soil in for her, and that would be my extent.
But you're getting the glory today,
I get
Peter.
the glory. That's what it is, and you got to learn to do that. You get the glory. Yes, this is in lieu of Florida. We don't go to Florida, or we don't go south. So what we do is we heat this little space, and Nora gets out here in February and March, and it costs us about as much to heat this little space as it does to go to Florida.
To Florida, wow.
But that's all right, right?
Yeah, because much better results, long-term results.
We like it because we love to eat, and that's the issue, is you like to eat when we know what we're eating. And we're not an organic farm, but we follow all organic principles. So we don't use any sprays, and we don't use any chemicals, and we don't use any herbicides or pesticides.
Okay. And your seeds, do you grow, these are all grown from seed?
These are all grown from seed, yes. And so our seeds are, we have a number of suppliers. If we read seed magazines in the winter, and if we see one that, we like the look of that we haven't grown before, well, we might try that one, give it a try. And some of them work, some of them don't, as you know, because
Yeah.
you're a gardener. And that's the first thing you have to tell people as they're gardening. They say, what's the secret? There's no secret. The secret is try it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, you got to try something else the next year, right?
And there's so many variables. Could be your soil, your particular location, the wind, the sun.
Oh,
all
there's
sorts
so
of
many
things.
variables, yeah.
Yes.
And you have to change the ones you can change, and then the ones you can't, you have to change the variety maybe that will grow tougher in that, if you want to put them in that area. But if you're a gardener, you can't be afraid of failure, because no matter how many years, I'm going to show you some when we're down there, right? I'm going to show you some major failures, and I've gardened all my life and spent huge numbers of hours in the garden. It's what I like to do. It's my happy place.
Yeah.
If I used to tell this story and people would say you're crazy, and that's all right too, because I would work all day at the greenhouse, and then I would, in the dark, at 9 o'clock at night, I would go and work my personal garden, because there was a street light. When we were across the way, we had the greenhouse.
Right,
across the-
right.
There's a street light. I could work the garden at night, but it was where it was quiet and where I was alone and didn't have people
Okay.
around. So even I worked in it all day, I still like to go out at night and do the gardening. Yeah.
Go to your quiet zone.
Go to my quiet place.
Okay,
yeah. So
great.
it's where, the cabbages, I always said cabbages never talk back to me. They always sort of,
So many plants don't.
yeah, it's always good, isn't it?
And do you ever save your own seeds from your
We do.
tomatoes or other plants?
Yeah, and that's an example here. Now that's those potato seeds are mine. Okay, so
Okay.
I'm going to bend down and try to get back up. I'm going to show you, because the question we get most often from people is why have you got your potato seeds on the ground in the greenhouse? And that's called green sprouting. So
Okay. You mean the little nubs?
the little ones, and you
Yeah.
see how tough they are.
Yeah.
And they are green.
Okay.
Those are green sprouted tomatoes, as opposed to, I took this one out of the storage bin, and that is what you would normally see with
I have lots of these in my kitchen.
Okay, well, those are hard to plant, and when you put them in, they will break off because they're very soft, as you can see how soft they are.
Okay, all right.
So if instead of planting your potatoes early, and they have a chance of rotting in the ground, you're much better off to green sprout them. Just leave them in a cool
place, yeah.
cool place where you can, they won't dry out. You don't
Okay.
want the wind blowing on them all the time. But then they just form these green sprouts, and then we'll cut those, because it's easy to see the sprouts, right?
Yes.
And they're really tough, like they're not going to come off.
Okay.
So you can handle them rough. Even.
When you're storing them like this, does the light factor, does it matter if they're open to the daylight?
Yeah,
or?
you want light. You don't want them in the dark, because if you're in the dark, then you're going to get
That's
this.
what's going to happen. Okay.
So that's called green sprouting.
Okay.
And people, for some reasons, really find that difficult to get. But it's a very simple process. Is just put your seed outside in the light, and like mine is indirect light because they're under the benches.
Okay.
Right, and they will green sprout
All right.
just like that.
And you can do this with store-bought potatoes?
You can, but the only issue you've got, I'm going to show you that here, with store-bought potatoes, is that some of store-bought potatoes are sprayed to prevent them from
sprouting. Yes.
And you don't know that because it doesn't say on the bag. It doesn't. Never says on the bag, we've sprayed these to prevent them from sprouting.
Okay.
But some are.
Okay.
Now that's what happens with these ones, because those are sweet potatoes.
Oh.
Okay.
Yes.
And I do the same thing. I just went and bought those at the superstore.
Okay.
But there's a chance that they could be sprayed. So when we put them in the ground, they might not germinate very quickly because they could have been sprayed and the sprouts won't come off them. Now eventually they'll come anyways, but they'll be too late, right?
Okay.
And in this case, we've just cut it in half.
Okay.
Buried it, put it under a heat pad because they love the heat.
All right.
Now that heat pad is gone now because we're trying to cool them, get them cooler. And then I'll cut that potato like that, and I'll put that sprout. There's a bigger one there.
Okay.
I'll put that in the ground.
And how deep will you plant it? Just to the top of the...
Just to the top of that. But we have to, sweet potatoes like the ground really warm.
Okay.
So you usually should put mulch on the top. We're not talking straw mulch.
No.
Because that'll keep the ground too cool.
Okay.
You have to put like black mulch, like the biodegradable mulch, the plasticky mulch that biodegrades in the soil.
Okay.
If you lay that down and then plant through it, because that heats the soil up.
Would cedar mulch work?
No, the same thing. It's going to keep the ground cool.
Cool and too acidic.
And it would probably in the end, but not for the first year. But
Okay.
You don't want to put a mulch on that keeps your ground cool. You want to put a mulch on that heats the soil up.
Oh, okay.
So even something clear, they have clear mulches, like plastic clear mulches,
Yeah.
that you can put over. I hate the word plastic. We shouldn't be promoting that type of thing, but
Synthetic.
Well, they are, and they're biodegradable.
Okay.
So most of them are corn based. So when they chop them up at the end of the year, when you can bury them back in the soil, and you're just adding organic material to your soil.
Excellent. And where do you get those products?
Those products are available in good garden centers.
Okay.
You won't probably find those in a garden center that sets up for the spring.
No.
But in good garden centers, Halifax Seed, the one across the road here, our old Mayfield greenhouses. I don't know. I didn't ask them whether they have biodegradable, but we buy ours because we lay it with a tractor.
Sure.
We buy ours out of a supplier.
In large volume, yeah.
Well, it's not large volume, but we buy a big roll of it.
Okay.
And then it would last me a couple of years. So.
Okay.
But that you have to keep if you're testing it, what you would lay your mulch down, reach underneath it, and make sure that the ground is warm, not cold.
Okay.
And that will tell you whether your sweet potatoes are going to grow or not, because they grow a vine, right?
Yes.
It's just a mat of vine over the top of the soil. So they're going to make the soil cooler, because they're going to cover by the end of the summer when you dig them. We had beautiful sweet potatoes last year, and they're just it's the difference between eating a tomato in the superstore in January and the tomato that you grow out of your garden. It's the same thing as sweet potatoes, night and day. But I can't keep them. I don't know why I can't. I've tried. It's one of those things.
You mean storage through the winter?
I cannot store it. So we eat them September and October, and I can get into November maybe, and then my sweet potatoes are done.
And do they go mushy? Or?
They have a black spot on them.
Oh.
And that black spot just spreads, and I can't keep them after that. And I've tried read all the materials, and it's one of those things that I still haven't, and it's not worth it for me in the end. I'm not going to do a whole lot to save
10 potatoes.
10 pounds of potatoes, right? It's not going to happen, because we've got our own, we store our own, regular eating potatoes.
And the difference between sweet potatoes and yams? Which are growing sweet potatoes?
Well, that is called a sweet potato, and I don't know the difference.
Okay.
But I did at one point, but with my advancing years, I can't tell you the answer to that question anymore. But yams is a I guess they would all be a native product. They don't look the same. I know that.
No. The yams are much more orange, and deeper color, and a denser texture.
That's right.
Yeah.
These are sweet potatoes. There's no question about it.
All right.
And that's just sourced locally. And I mean, if I they used to sell is the little ones. Everybody got into, for a while, those little potatoes.
Oh yes.
Everybody threw those out, right? Because we want a nice big potato. But then some smart marketer said, "Whoo, we can sell those as baby potatoes to all the
expensive and chic." Yes.
Expensive and chic. So those became quite popular even in the major superstores, and they had the same thing with the sweet potatoes. They had the small sweet potatoes.
Oh,
and that's the ones I always looked for when I went shop. I didn't go shopping often, but when I went shopping, I was looking for the small ones. Couldn't find them this year, so I got the bigger ones. But they seem to be doing okay.
Because there's several here where you've got multiple.
They'll come all right.
Yeah, they'll come along fine.
So this is what we do. What Nora does here is start all our seedlings. And it looks like a lot, and it is a lot. I understand most people say, "What do you do with all that?" Mary, we eat it. I don't know what other people don't, what other people eat, but this is what we, we'll grow those onions, and I should have brought out some onions from the storeroom, because as I showed you coming up, I cleaned the storeroom out. Some of them had sprouted, but I've still got onions just like the day I put them down there. Yeah, they're beautiful, and they will stay till I have onions in the garden.
I think it's a lost. They call it an art now, but it's a lost basic skill that years ago, when we were kids, everybody grew half their food,
Yeah.
Even if you had a small little patch.
Is it coming back, do you think?
I hope so, desperately hope so, but a lot of young people don't eat this kind of food because they don't know what it is, and the tastes are strange to them. So I think that's a whole new educational process we have to go through.
I think it is, and we are going to refer to that little garden bed that my wife has beside the back door. It's amazing what you can grow in a very small space if you just are selective. I talk to a lot of people about gardening because they know I garden, so they talk to me about it. And the first thing they want to do is grow potatoes and corn in their little. No, potatoes. Don't grow those in your little garden bed because they just take up huge
So much room.
space.
Yeah.
What you want to grow are the things that cost you so much money when you go. You grow your basils and you grow all your herbs and you grow all those things. In a little garden bed, you can fill them with that, and you have enough for the whole year. You can freeze them. You can put them in oils. You can,
Yeah.
dry them, and you've got your herbs that you know where they came from. For the
And
whole
that
year.
make everything taste good.
And freeze
Yeah.
the dill. We've got dill, which I'm going to show you when we go down actually into the cold frame. We've got dill growing already, which will just be used for, our summer eating.
Yeah, and there's quite an increase and interest in community gardens that started up the last several years, and people are truly amazed. They think, oh, what am I going to grow in a little 5x7 box? Well, just as
Yes.
you've said, you can grow probably
Amazing what you can
months
grow.
of food in it.
And especially if you're diligent about it, you can get 2 or 3 crops. The same thing is people say, well, I grow 50 feet of beans. You grow 50 feet of beans, so what are you going to do with them? Right? 50 feet, you're going to freeze them all, I understand that, but we try to grow now beans on a succession planting session. So if we have a row of beans, the length of this is just 16 feet, this little house, 16 feet's a good row,
Yes.
maybe even a little less. And then 2 weeks from now, I'll put another 16 feet in, and 2 weeks from then, another 16 feet, and 2 weeks, another 16 feet. So you get beans coming all along.
Right.
And then if you want to go away for a week and the beans are ready, you lost 16 feet of beans, right?
Yeah.
Or 10 feet of beans. So that's one of the things we've learned is that when we're growing those type of crops, we do succession planting more than just trying to be a big long row of beans. Too much work anyways to pick them all.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Very labor intensive. And what about rotating now? Do you grow your beans in the same rows every
No,
year? Of
we're
course
lucky
not.
that now because we
You
have
enough
a
space to choose from.
and enough gardens. So I have 4 major gardens, and we move between those gardens year after year. Because right now we're growing a commercial crop, as I mentioned when you first got here. We still grow one commercial crop, which is garlic,
Yes.
and I have to rotate that
Okay.
because you'll get disease in the soil, and botrytis and other. Even other things that will affect garlic, so you have to have a rotation and not grow it in the same soil. We
Okay.
try not to grow garlic in the same soil 4 years on. So on the 4th year, we're growing the crop back in where it was
Okay.
4 years ago.
So you move it around.
Yeah,
Okay.
move it around,
Yeah.
That's the theory. And it's the same thing with this. We won't grow where we grew our pumpkins last year, we won't grow pumpkins on that ground this year, right? We'll put our corn there this year, and that type of thing.
And I presume that's the same with tomatoes, because tomatoes are
Tomatoes.
pretty heavy feeders, aren't they?
Exactly. I'm going to show you when we're going to do another little segment right in when we get down in the cold frame. I'm going to show you how we do our tomatoes so that it's on a 3-year rotation.
Okay.
So we would grow tomatoes every 3rd year in the same soil, but it would not be in that soil for 3 years.
All right.
And we clean the soil between.
Okay. And if people were growing in planters on their decks or balconies or backyard, you'd still want to change the soil
this.
or else change the pots that
Exactly, yeah.
the tomatoes are going in. You'd
Yeah,
still-
change the soil for sure.
Okay.
And then I'd wash the pot out. If I was, if I had a tomato in there last year, I would make sure I washed it out. You don't have to go to any great length, just a little
Hose
soap and
it,
water,
yeah.
and then a teaspoon of Javex in a pail of water and wash that out again, and then start all over again. And
Okay.
you're good to go.
Okay.
Because you can grow tomatoes on your deck.
Yes, many people do, yeah.
They love the
I've
heat,
done it,
right?
yeah,
They're,
yeah.
they're another one of those things. That are
And if
just heat
they're
lovers.
handy to you, you're more inclined to water them
Yeah.
regularly, which they desperately need water just about every day.
That's right. That's one of the probably the biggest failings. I mean, we're talking. You and I are old. I won't say old
No,
gardeners.
you better not
No, okay,
say-
I will not
no.
say we're mature gardeners.
Yes.
And you understand that tomatoes need a constant source of water,
Okay.
and that's probably one of the biggest issues when people say, "I don't understand what's happening to my tomatoes." Likely, it's a constant source of water.
Okay.
And if you get into a dry spell and you're not watering, tomatoes won't do well. That's
Yeah.
just they'll get black spot. Is one of the things where you get that end
Yes,
rot.
yes, definitely.
That's usually a sign that
Usually
you
a
haven't
water
watered
issue?
them. Yeah, 'cause
Okay.
it's not taking the calcium up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a big.
And do you use any fertilizers when they're in this little greenhouse? Do you fertilize any of your plants?
Yeah,
or?
we do. We have a big organic compost pile that we maintain. It's about 50 feet long. So we maintain that, and at the end of the compost pile, that would be about 5 year. That's the product we're using at the end of it. You'll just see some when we go outside on that little garden. I just spread some this morning.
Okay.
And that's our main fertilizer. We would use that in a watering can that we
make compost tea?
That's right.
Okay.
And then water with that.
All right.
Yeah. And then we also, because this is not a business, and that's what people have to understand, we don't do this as a business. We do it as our hobby. And so, like, we're not afraid to say, well, I want to buy that instead of, we buy organic chicken manure.
Okay.
And have it to come to the farm. We buy
from local.
It actually comes out of Bedford, Quebec.
Local chickle people.
Yeah, chickle people.
Chicken farms.
Yeah, it's dried. I'll show you the
Okay.
product, and so you can have a look at it. It's a dried product that they ship in a half-ton bag. So we use that as our main fertilizer through the season.
All right.
We use our compost obviously to start on our own compost to start the beds, and then through the season we would use this dried chicken manure.
Yeah. Oh, sounds good.
Yeah.
Give us another quick rundown, because you have several more plants.
Those are mainly
over here.
herbs there. Now, so we would grow in our dream house, the one that we keep covered.
Okay.
It's not heated, but we keep it covered, and we keep it covered for a number of reasons. To grow tomatoes now, everybody has faced in Charlotte County has faced the issue that they get blight on their tomatoes, right?
Yes.
And they complain. The issue with blight is if the plant stays wet.
Too wet.
Too wet. So
Okay.
if the actual plant stays wet and not the roots.
Ah.
So and then the blight just spreads.
Okay.
So in our situation, what we do, we have a dream house which is 50 feet long. We have 4 rows in that dream house, which we'll see a little later on. But we then supply the water. So we don't let nature water the leaves, and they don't stay wet. We provide the water, and we put the water at the root level.
Okay.
So their plants are the leaves are never wet, and most of the time we would beat the blight problem. We don't get blight necessarily.
Because we certainly have had unusual weather the last several years. It's progressively stranger in Charlotte County, and we'll get avalanche rainfalls sometimes for days on end.
Exactly, and that's where the blight comes in when you get into that. When those plants stay wet all day, then you're going to get into a blight problem.
Okay.
But in ours, now we would grow in that house. We would grow things that we intensively grow. Like, we don't grow a lot of things in there, but we would put our sweet potatoes in there. We would put our eggplant in there. We put all our peppers, and we grow 50 plants of peppers, because I make hot pepper flakes.
Oh, wonderful.
I dry them, and we make paprika.
Ooh.
We do all those things. I'll show you those to just remind me of that, because know
don't
what
worry.
happens
Yes,
sometimes.
I'm heading to the garlic personally, but
Garlic,
yes,
yeah.
I'll
I'll bring out some powdered garlic too, so we can see what.
Good.
We make powdered garlic too and retail that out. So that's the only thing. But all these herbs will go in an open garden, not in the only ones that we'll put in the dream house are things that we're trying to control, really, a disease issue, or we need the heat units.
Okay.
Peppers need heat units, eggplants need heat units, and tomatoes need heat units, and so do the sweet potatoes.
Now, we can't pick a date that things would move out to an outdoor garden, but temperature-wise, what's the guideline there?
Well, they all used to say, I used to sell, Mayfield Greenhouses was the business we ran, as you know.
Yes.
And we always used to tell people is that if you can sit in the ground, right, and your bum is not cold, then it's okay to plant.
Okay.
That's a general rule.
Yes.
Most people try to get out there way too early.
Yeah.
And if you have a thermometer, you can check the actual ground temperature, and you'll be amazed. I turned over the compost to put a little compost on that. It's full of ice. This last week, it's still frozen in the middle.
Yep.
The ground is still really cold, right? Now it heats up quickly, and you can watch that. But 55 degrees, you're looking for ground temperature.
At least, okay.
Yeah, before you put. So now that's scientific. You don't need that. You can put your hand in and say, "Ooh, that's still cold." Right?
Yes.
Or you can make the ground warmer by putting things on it that heat the ground up. Like we have a greenhouse, the ground gets warmer in our cold frame, and then we put stuff on the soil the same way that makes the soil warmer underneath it.
And what about those tunnels that they're selling now?
I just use those to get my brassica started.
Okay.
I took them off yesterday.
Yes.
And I'm going to plant these potatoes this afternoon, inside the greenhouse, dream house, and I will cover them with a cloche.
Okay.
And that's the same thing. It'll bring the heat up in the day in that soil very quickly.
Okay.
And then they'll germinate.
If you have individual plants, putting plastic container or cardboard box or something over them at night to keep cold off, does that work? Or?
It does work to some degree, because if you get a real snapping frost, you're probably still going to be in trouble. Right?
Okay.
But a lot of people use those tomato cages.
Yes.
And then put something over the tomato cage.
Okay.
And if you don't mind the work of it,
yep,
that works, because you put a mini greenhouse right there.
That's right. And would you put like a green garbage bag on, just take it off during the daytime? Or would you try to keep a clear?
I would keep it clear,
over.
But the issue you got to watch is that sun will heat that up. It can easily get to 120 degrees under there.
Oh dear.
And you cook your plant, right?
Yep.
So it requires a management. If you got one plant that you're babying or 4 plants you're babying, fine.
Yeah.
You can manage that, right? But if you just can't sort of, with most things, that's the same way. You've got to sort of manage it a bit, right?
Yeah.
It's not, I always...
Yeah, you can't put the pot outside and expect to walk out in 3 weeks and have tomatoes on
Beautiful. I planted my seeds. I don't understand why nothing's growing, right?
Yeah.
I haven't been back in the garden.
No.
And so, yeah, it requires constant work, not work, because it's not attention.
And care.
And care, that's
Yeah.
what it is. And,
Yeah.
and if you like doing it, you don't mind going out.
Mm-hmm.
I also tell that story often. There was a bank manager in St. Stephen who just loved to garden, and when he would come, I couldn't get rid of him. He would talk gardening by the hour, right? But he wouldn't talk about the banking issues, but he would talk about gardening. And he would come home at noon hour, so help me, this is not a lie. He would come home at noon hour, his wife had a tea towel, she wrapped it around his neck with his shirt and tie on, handed him his tomato sandwich, and he spent his whole noon hour walking through the garden. That's how he relaxed and decompressed for the day. And he just loved
it's healthy,
it. It was healthy, and he just loved it.
Yeah.
You could see him out there eating a sandwich, walking. Anyways, that's the care it takes. You're in the garden, you see what's happening. You know if you've got an issue, and you can address it.
Peter, thank you so much. This has been fabulous to see your amazing greenhouse that produces, I think, enough food for 10 people or more, and to learn so many great tips. We want to come back to Gore Farm and look at some of your other areas of production, because you've been farming a long time. You've got a fabulous garlic production I've heard about, and check out your kitchen garden, all sorts of things.
You're welcome anytime.
Okay, well, I'll definitely be back, and folks, you are welcome to come back anytime too to watch Gardening by the Bay.